Finding it up. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The regular meeting of the Grosse Ile Township Planning Commission will come to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, it's been a while since we've met. Been several months, actually, going back to the end of April. That's a long time for us not to meet, but typically we're driven by applicants and what the applicants' needs are. And we had earlier this year, was it 3, maybe 4 different applications that we were processing at the time, and for reasons unbeknownst certainly to me, they chose not to proceed through the application process. So on that basis, I didn't see a need to call a meeting just to take people's time in the summer. So, but given the fact that we do have some administrative items that we can't address, I got with Brian and we decided that it was good to get together now, kind of work through these things, kind of clear the decks a little bit, and so when we do get an application or two, that we're free and clear to be able to take it on and make progress with it. So, although I have to say that not having an applicant agenda led to some shock, particularly with Jim over here, because he only had like 3 pages in his package, and usually he gets 30. So he thought we were on a paper saving crusade or something. I don't know, but that's the way it is when you don't have applications. So you see the agenda in front of you. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to that agenda? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Motion from Brian.
Support.
From Jim. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Agenda stands. We will now move to the approval of the minutes back from April the 20th that Lori prepared for us. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Dan? Brian? No. Steve?
No.
Jim?
No.
Eric?
Nope.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Motion from Eric. Support?
Support.
Jim? Call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Once again, Lori does an excellent job for us, and we thank her in absentia. She's not here tonight. That takes us to the next item, which is public comment. Anybody who wishes to speak to the Commission about anything not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, we'll move to the next item, which is a presentation. Now, this presentation is being given by Bill Kostick, and he is from the DPS Commission. Now, as you all know, on the Planning Commission, we don't engage in activities relative to the DPS, but in this case, I thought it was important for both the Planning Commission and the community to hear a presentation that Bill has relative to fixing our roads and water systems. It's a very critical issue for the island, and so in the presentation today that Bill's going to give us, you'll have an opportunity to hear and perhaps ask questions that somebody in the audience, the television audience, might be having in his head, and you can get that out and give Bill a chance to address it. So for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, Bill is going to speak to us on this topic. And at the end, we'll go around and see if anybody has any questions that they would like to get answered. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. When we talked about our recommendations to the Township Board, one of the first things we made note of is we wanted to come to all the boards and commissions, citizens like we are on the DPS Commission. We had a joint meeting with the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and with Brian led the discussion on that. And you're one of the first commissions that we're presenting to tonight, so we want to make it known what we're proposing. And to start, and since you're the planners, I want to say, I think we've been planning in the DPS Commission, but most of our planning involves sewers and gutters and drains and so forth, but this time it's roads. And our commission meets at least twice a year, but every April we get in a van or bus together. We spend 3 or 4 hours driving all the roads. We do have some maintenance money, and every year we figure out where that maintenance money is going to go. It's a little over $100,000 a year that we have, and most of it goes into the neighborhoods where the county will not fix or comes lately to fix potholes. And as you all know, all of our roads, like every other township in the state, are owned by the county that we reside in. Townships do not own roads. Municipalities, cities own roads. But counties, county road commissions, most counties have a road commission. In our case, it's a DPS commission, the Wayne County Department of Public Services. So they're responsible for all of our roads. We'll get to the county in a minute. I also want to say that in terms of planning, in 2010, and every 10 years, we're supposed to do a reliability study of our water system. And they look at a lot of factors, but one of the key factors is in between each hydrant, pressure tests are taken to determine what the flows are, if they can meet certain pressures. And the water main recommendations that we're putting forth are basic needs that we have in our water system. Hopefully every one of you have a copy of this plan.
Yes, this was passed out.
And I want to call to your attention that last Tuesday, a week ago, this was mailed out to 5,000 properties, every property on the tax roll in the city. So we're trying to be as open as we can about what our proposals are. So let me go through the proposals. If you'd go to page 2 of the handout, a lot of writing on it, but I just want to read the summary. On Election Day, November 3rd, 2015, Grosse Ile voters will be asked to consider a ballot proposal that calls for the sale of $18,800,000 in general obligation bonds to repair and make safety improvements to almost all the island's primary and secondary roads, and to replace several sections of aged and outdated water mains. This plan is a product of over 4 years of examination of alternatives, and I might add, and discussions with Wayne County. At the bottom in blue of that page, there's some explanation there, but at the bottom in blue, it says to the community, you're invited. The DPS Commission will hold 2 open house sessions to explain the proposal. One is next Tuesday night, September 29th, at 7 p.m. in this room, and the second is October 13th at 7 p.m., again in this township boardroom. So what are we proposing? If you go to the third page, and on the screen is a map that isn't showing up very well, but I would say that the proposed treatment to the roads that we're recommending, as you can see from the map, are all our major corridors. That includes East River, West River, Meridian, Church Road, Park Lane, South Point, Grow Road, Ferry, Bellevue, all the major collector roads on the island. I probably missed 1 or 2. The treatment that we're proposing, there's one road shows up in yellow, and that's Church Road. Church Road between East River and the canal. That road in some places is only 18 feet wide. It's so far gone that that's the one road that we're talking about total reconstruction. I mean, we're going to dig up the sub-base material under the road, put new storm sewers in, and rebuild that road. Hopefully we can get 22 feet in width, 2 11-foot lanes versus 2 9-foot lanes, which would make it a lot safer. With that, all the intersections along the way would be fixed. And then the other section from the canal to East River, we hope to make resurfacing improvements, and it yet remains, we can't promise we're going to get 22 feet. I hope to widen it some, but we'll see what we can get away with. Now, all the plans that we develop, we have to submit to the county. So that's what the road improvement there calls for. All the roads shown in green in the map you have, and they're in a light blue on the map on TV, talk about resurfacing, total resurfacing, where we would go in like they're doing on Jefferson right now, like the county's doing, where you would mill off 3-4 inches of pavement, existing pavement, do base repairs in the base material where it's really gone or failed, and then come in and resurface it with at least 4 inches of new asphalt, which should give you a 20-year life on that pavement. Should have a good 20-year pavement life on that. And that's for 3 miles of East River, 3 miles of West River, and 3 miles of Meridian would be treated that way. and so would Ferry. Ferry's at a point where we had hoped to do some other treatments to it, but it needs to be resurfaced. It's just too far gone to do anything. And there are other roads that are starting to develop that way. Now, finally, in red on your maps, in red, I think the red shows up as a little darker color on this larger map on TV, is something we call chip seal. We started studying the chip seal, and Mr. Ranka would know about this. We came to about 3 years ago, I think. But our commission, we went to Monroe County, we went to Lenawee County, we looked at their chip seal operations. Why did we look at chip seal? Well, chip seal has no structural value. What it does do is it seals off all the cracks in the roads and provides a new surface that wearing surface will extend the life of asphalt pavement for a considerable period of time. What we learned is that the cost of chip seal, people are comparing this 10% of the cost of resurfacing. We spent, we're budgeting about $500,000 a mile where we're going to resurface, anywhere from $500,000 to $600,000. The variable there depends on how much storm work's got to be done to properly drain the pavements. But the chip seal that we did this year, we did 4 miles on an experimental basis, and we spent about $60,000 a mile. The reason is we did a lot of base repairs. I want to call them not base, but surface repairs. We went in on East River, for example, right north of Grow, and took several sections of the really failed pavement and milled it a couple inches off, even went deeper in some spots, resurfaced it with, as you would a driveway, let's say, some new asphalt, and then chip sealed over it to give it a consistent pavement. So we fixed the bad spots. That's what we did. Most communities, counties that do this, they do try to hit every road anywhere between 3 and 5 years, redo it. Under this plan, we would hit all these roads that we're going to chip seal twice in the 4-year period that we hope to build everything. That's our plan. And one thing I would add on chip seal, we've met with mostly favorable comments about it. People have already forgotten what it was like before we did the chip seal. There's a little vibration to it. It seems to be wearing down anyway. It seems to be getting better, less noticeable. But people have already forgotten all the bumps they used to go through and avoid when they drove those sections of road. So the other thing we learned is that Wayne County is the only county in Michigan that doesn't do chip sealing. And we submitted the MDOT specifications to do our work, the chip seal, and we had a consultant come in for free, an engineer, a retired MDOT person wanted to help us, and looked at the specs and our engineers, and we submitted our plans to Wayne County to chip seal. It took us 7 months to get approval for a chip seal. And so we said we wanted to do this on a pilot program, and actually I wanted to do it last year instead of this year, so people would have time to look at it. And by the time we got approval from Wayne County, we were too late to do the chip sealing because the weather has to be done in June, July, or August. Once you get into colder nights like we're experiencing now, the seal doesn't set up properly. So if it gets below 50 degrees or in the low 50s, it's not good for it. So at any rate, that's our proposal. Now, on the road part, I would say this. If there's been a lot of talk in the state legislature about doing something. Some of the questions we've already been asked are, well, what if the legislature passes an additional amount of money for roads? Well, we would, if that happens, the question that we all have to answer is how much money might we even get on their island? In dealing with Wayne County, we put this in writing to them. We've actually cut back our program. We asked them for $3 million to supplement what we've proposed to do here originally. And Wayne County looked at it and came back, and we have it in writing. They said that we have a good program, but they have no financial ability to contribute to the program. And they will continue to fix potholes, but don't expect any resurfacing. Now, the one story I have on that is in 2013, the county has a needs list. Got 200 projects on it. They do about 14 miles a year, 14 projects a year. Each of their 200 projects is about a mile. They average about that. And it's about $1 million worth of work. So in 2013, Meridian was on their needs list. We were 76th on their needs list. And I was very hopeful. 76 between Rosehill Parkway and Church. That's 1.75 miles. I envision that, and if you drive that section, you know how bad it is. So we were 76th. In 2014, that project dropped to 74th. This year, 2015, it's 86th. So we've gone the wrong way in terms of county priorities. Our commission has looked at this, and what are we competing against? We're competing against Cherry Hill, Ford Road, Jefferson, Fort Street, in Livonia, 7 Mile, all the roads that the county has jurisdiction over. So we're competing against all the rest of Wayne County, and we've been told, you know, you don't have the traffic accidents, you don't have the traffic volume, you don't have the heavy truck traffic, and compared to where we need to spend our money, that's where you are on the list. So that's why we came up with this recommendation. If you read the plan under the roads, it breaks down what we propose to do every year, and I don't know if you want me to go through that. You can read that on your own. John, do you think I should go through it?
Not necessary.
Okay.
I think you've made your point.
So you can see where the roads that we're proposing to do every year. Next is the water system. In 2010, I mentioned already that we had a water reliability study done, and it turns out that there's 2 miles of water main on East River, 2 miles of water main on West River. These show up in dark blue. So there's 2 miles of East River, 2 miles of West River, where the plan was ultimately to encircle the island on East River and West River and around the perimeter of the island with 12-inch water main. Those 2 miles on each East and West River are 6-inch main that are 60 years old and that need to be, from a fire flow standpoint, the reliability study said those need to be replaced with 12-inch main. 2 years ago, fire chief came to us and asked to replace those main. Then we show Church Road water main that would be rebuilt because we don't want to pave Church Road, fix it up, and then come along later and put water main in under it. And there's a section of Meridian. On Meridian, we have both a 16-inch main and an 8-inch main. The 16-inch was built by the Navy when they built this base where we sit tonight, 70 years ago. The 8-inch, we have numerous breaks on it. So we want to start to replace that. And then there's some sections both at the south end of the island and the north end where we've had problems. We want to replace the water main. So some have asked, well, why don't you replace the water main by traditional selling a revenue bond and putting it on the water rates? Well, we already have high water rates. We know that because when we have to deal with the water rates, we know that we have some of the highest water and sewer rates in the county. We thought at least this way, we tie-barred the water main improvements because we don't want to fix a road and then come back a year or two later and do cross connections and everything else in the road and destroy the road we just fixed. I mean, you hear stories about that. We don't want to do that. So that's basically our plan. I've talked about the county, and the reality is that Wayne County's in financial difficulty. All the road money that they get for road money is all from the gas and motor vehicle registration fees. Their revenues have dropped since 2000 by $10 million, from $64 million to $54 million. You know that they've laid off numerous employees in the road maintenance group as well as the rest of the county, and I know Brian is familiar with what's going on there. So their problems are real, and they don't have the money that they used to have. Fortunately, on a complimentary basis, when we call about a pothole, they usually respond. They've been pretty good about that. But they are certainly told us they're not going to resurface any roads. And so that's what we're up against. Now, that's what voters have to decide. Now, why did we come up with the recommendations we did? As we drive the roads, just like you as the planners, we're concerned about the appearance of this community, about the drivability, about the safety, driving roads, safety for pedestrians. That you have to use the roads because there's no other path for them to take. And if you try to walk West River or East River at night, or bicycle, that's very dangerous. Not to say you should be doing that at night, but the road conditions are just deplorable. And in the wintertime, when these potholes fill up with ice, they're even more dangerous. So we decided it was time to bite the bullet, as many communities in Michigan have done. And I would hasten to tell you that it was in 2012 that Riverview passed 3 mills for road maintenance for 10 years. Ferndale just voted a $45 million bond issue for over 10 years. Last November, some 60 communities in Michigan, including big cities like Southfield, $99 million bond issue for roads. Some of them were county roads. Farmington Hills, 2 mills, some of those would be county roads, that they're fixing in those cities. And some of those cities, roads like Greenfield, 12 Mile Road, they're county roads, even though they run through these various cities, because they run through Southfield, Oak Park, Farmington Hills, and Novi. County has jurisdiction. That's Oakland County, of course. But I'm just saying that many communities have taken the local initiative to do something about it. My final word on it would be, and then we'll answer questions. I intend every year, if this is approved, voters have to decide whether they're going to vote for it or against it. Hopefully people will vote. If it is approved, we intend to go back to the county every year and ask them for a contribution. They've cut out this $3 million from what we originally asked. We even proposed the 20% local share. It's all federal money that they're using, that they're matching. 80% of the $14 million they spend a year resurfacing for road improvements is federal dollars. We proposed originally to match their 20% required match. Boy, we got a golden egg here because they're going to go for this. But they said, you're not in our priority list. You're not going to make it in the foreseeable future, and we do have it in writing. So the conclusion we came up with is this is a tough issue. But do we want the roads like they are today, or do we want to do something about it? We believe they're not going to get any better. And a good example is West River. West River's got very small traffic volumes. We did a study of traffic volumes on West River a couple of years ago. I think it was probably 4 or 5 now. And as you leave Grosse Hill Parkway and go north, traffic starts out at maybe 900, 700 vehicles a day, and finally gets, by the time you get to Horsemill, it's like 300-400 vehicles a day. So compared to what we're up against, where communities have 20,000, 30,000 vehicles a day on their roads, that's part of the problem that we have. And we just can't ignore West River. It's so bad, something has to be done with it. So we added West River, even though it has low traffic volumes. But we just thought you just can't let it sit that way forever. And if anybody's watching from West River, I would just say our plan there is to just resurface it in place. Not going to widen. I know widening is an issue with people on West River. That's not our intent. It's to just resurface it in place and fix the drainage problem, because it doesn't drain well from east to west across the road. I hope I've covered my points, and be glad to answer your questions.
Very good. Thank you. Let's start through the commission here and see what questions people might have. Steve, let's start with you.
First of all, thank you. Very nice presentation. I also like the touch of you folks sending this to the homes. So it was a good intro to the entire project. The only question I have as I look at East River is something that maybe it was a year or 2 years ago. I was either at a board meeting or somewhere, and one of the things that kind of concerned me was the township wanting to be nice to the East River homeowners. So when this road project that you're proposing, and I'm hoping it is approved, those who have drainage or the pumps that pull water and it's fed underneath that road to their properties, I'm hoping the intent is you're not going to replace those if those are damaged, because I think that is a misuse of funds. And I'd like to hear more about that, because there's a lot of homes along this that could be interrupted with that.
Steve, you ask a tough question, because the water main is going to affect all those lines. And generally, wherever we are, whatever street we're on, whether it's that street or Park Lane or home, and we replace a water main, we fix those when we go by them, because we have to disrupt them. That's the way we've treated everybody. I would guess that if we don't do that, we're going to have just as many people on the other side of that issue. Now, hopefully we'll know where they are, and that the replacement will be very minimal in terms of cost. Now, part of the water main replacement, we're going to try to do it underground without digging big trenches. Can't do it everywhere. So the honest answer is traditionally we've always replaced the sprinkler system when we disrupted them. Like we have sump lines that go out to roads. When you have to fix a water main, you encounter a sump line, we try to restore that. Now, the one thing we will do when we do the roads is if we have people that are splashing sump lines out onto the pavement, we're going to try to correct, we're going to make sure that people are forced to correct that. You know what I'm saying there? Where it ices up and so forth. Traditionally, that's what we've done. Being honest with you about how we've treated other people. I would add, Steve, it's something we haven't discussed yet. I mean,
It's,
at this point.
For me, again, it's my opinion. I think it's disappointing. If they put things there that they should not have put there, I don't feel it's our right with taxpayer dollars to fix. That's my opinion.
No to that.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you for the presentation. Just for clarity, 2017 and 2019, it mentions chip seal
Yes.
for 12 miles of road. Is the chip seal last 2 years? We're going to do the same 12 miles, and then we do the same 12 miles 2 years later, or is that 24 miles
Well, I think actually
roads?
it's the way we have it planned, it's 4 construction seasons apart. Well, we wanted to do it twice because what we've learned is what Monroe County does is they try to do every one of the roads they chip seal every 3 to 5 years. Now, by doing it once, what we've done is we've done more than we could do if we just ignored it, because we're going to spread this oil, and it fills in all the cracks and crevices. It's almost like crack sealing. And then you cover it with this thin layer of stone, which helps the permanent nature of the fix. One question that's been asked about, well, what about snow plowing? Well, it doesn't seem to destroy it very badly. And the way the county plows snow here, as infrequently as they do, it shouldn't be a problem. But at any rate, we wanted to do it twice. Now, what else I'd say to you is if we can get some county money, or if the bids come in on any of these roads, we've been conservative on our estimates because right now, contractors' costs, contractors that are bidding, there's more work right now on roads, believe it or not, than there has been 5 years ago. So contractors are busy. The prices are real high right now. So looking forward, we have conservative costs in here. We don't want to promise that we're going to do these roads and then say, oh, we don't have enough money. So we have enough money to do these things. If the bids come in better, we're going to try to extend those, do more resurfacing, and less chip seal. But the answer is we felt that by chip sealing twice, what we've learned from the communities that do it, is that it extends the life a great deal. If we don't do anything, these roads are going to deteriorate. The one that shocks me just recently is if you drive on East River from Grow south to Hickory Island. I can't believe how that road has deteriorated this year. It's bump after bump after bump. And it's almost like we're going to have to do a lot of repairs, surface repairs, before we could chip seal it. So to me, that would be a candidate. If the bids come in good, we might do some more resurfacing there. So the answer is there's no structural value to the chip seal, but it's a good maintenance treatment that everybody agrees, all the other road commissions, and I haven't talked to all of them, but we've been told by the contractors that we've talked to, and there's been 2 of them that we've talked to. It's only 3 that we know in Michigan that do this, that all the counties are very happy with it as a method of preserving and lengthening the pavement life. If we don't do anything, things are just going to get really bad here.
Mr. Rucci.
No, I really appreciate the presentation. It's saw this at home and read through it, and it looks very interesting. And I, along with Steve, hope that it passes because I can hear the I can hear and see the frustration that the people that are supposed to be funding this, meaning the county and the state, are not doing that, and we can pound our fists on the table and hope that it happens and cry that it doesn't happen, but that's not going to get our roads fixed. And the fact is, in order for our community to be as good as it should be, and property values worth what they should be, we need to fix our roads. And if this is the only way we can do it, this is the way we have to do it. So I appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate you coming out and doing this, and all the other efforts you're doing.
Well, thank you, Jay. And you raised a question I want to address, is if the state were to do something, and say, and I'm speculating here, but say the $54 million that Wayne County gets jumps by $30 million. I don't know if it will, but let's say it does. I'm sure that a third of that's going to go back into replenishing, restoring the trucks they haven't purchased, the equipment they haven't purchased, and the staff that they've laid off to bring some people back so they could do a better job of maintenance. So that leaves $20 million. So how much of that $20 million do you think we might even, if they spread it out on a per capita basis to be equitable, which they won't do, they're going to go back to that needs list, but how much do you think we could get? Do you think we could even get $1 million? That's a decision people are going to have to make. Our DPS commission doesn't believe, I mean, we can ask, but if all this money comes from the state, and it's going to take a couple of years for it to come in, if we were to even get $1 million, okay, so that's a tenth of what we're proposing to do here. All the rest of our roads are going to continue to deteriorate. That's the conclusion our DPS commission has reached.
Yep.
So thanks for asking the question.
Sure. Thank you.
Brian.
Well, thank you for coming before us today. It's great to have you out here, pitching the proposal, which I think is solid, and it shows how much effort that you've put into it. And I just want to echo that every year that we put this off, it's going to get worse and it's going to cost more money. It's a bit like fixing the roof on your house. So if you don't do it right away, you're going to have water damage in the attic, and then eventually get down in the rest of your house. You might have to have black mold and gut the whole thing. That's the way the roads are going to work too. So it's only a matter of time now who is actually going to pay for it. And I'll just give a very quick overview of saying that the federal government, with the transportation bill, the Highway Trust Fund, which is supposed to fund a lot of roads, it's broke. They've been going through supplemental incomes, doing reauthorizations year after year. They're not getting very far. And we all know that the state isn't going, state is actually worse in that case. And even a lot of the proposals that they've been talking about, it's been minimal amount of money than actually needed. So if that money does come through, by the time it trickles down to Wayne County and comes to Groseal, it's not going to be very much. So the question is, do we want to take care of it, or do we want to let someone else? And it's it's a safety issue, it's health and welfare. And Bill, I know you mentioned a lot of cities that are doing it. I know that townships are doing it too. So Canton Township, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and that's one of the reasons why they're getting a lot of the projects as well. Green Oak Township in Livingston County, another rural community right on the edge of Brighton, kind of on the edge of Oakland County. They're seeing a lot of growth. They're doing the exact same thing. So I think it's a solid proposal. I personally support it. My concerns are, just a little bit on the chip seal, which I know from a bicycle and pedestrian perspective, it can be a little bit of an issue, but I know that you've taken efforts to put like a slurry seal or a fog seal along the curb line to make sure that that's minimized. I think that when we're going through and doing this is also the perfect time to make sure that you're putting down pavement markings. So if we're going to be having high visibility crosswalk markings like we have over on Macomb, right by the new bike museum, that's a perfect way to increase safety along the bike paths and along our sidewalks. So it's a good opportunity there.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Brian. Mr. Boggs.
I find this plan very exciting. I definitely think the roads need improvement here on the island. I do drive on East River frequently, and that's one of the test areas, it appears to me, for your chip seal. And I think that's what was done there is greatly improved from what we had before, and at 10% of the cost of resurfacing. I think it's a great idea. One question I have is, how many years is the millage increase planned for?
Well, we're selling bonds for 20 years, so it's 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Millage rate, I guess I failed to mention that. The average millage rate is it's in this brochure, 2.12 mils. 2.12 mils. And just to give you an idea, Ann Darzniak put this together for us. If you have a home that's worth $300,000, it's on the tax roll for $150,000. The cost will be $318. We're talking some real money. If you have a home that's worth $400,000, $200 on the tax roll, it'll cost you $424. And this is both to fix the roads and the water main, the island. That's why, as we looked at this, we called it a great community investment. That was our byline that we came up with. So, anyway, I appreciate this. Is there anybody else?
Dan, any other questions?
No, that's all.
Mr. Ranka?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Bill, I appreciate all the planning and forethought that went into this. I hope the residents can appreciate the fact that this is a very specific plan, right? It's not just give us $18.8 million and we'll figure out where to put it. It's, hey, we're doing this road in 16, we're doing that road in 17, this road in 18 and in 19, and here's the water mains that go along with that. So I hope that the residents can appreciate that there is a very specific plan behind the millage. Obviously, I'm pretty deep in the details here from seeing this presentation and other presentations very similar to it for a lot of years, but just a couple of questions that some people at home may have. And one of them is along the East River, will there be a widened shoulder when that goes back in?
Boy, that's certainly my intent, yes. The plan will be to have a widened shoulder so that right now there's a bit of a widened shoulder, but I hope we can have a widened shoulder so it'll be 3 or 4 feet. Safe for people to ride a bike or walk, safer than it is today. I ride my bike there on East River quite a bit. Was out there Saturday afternoon, and can't ride the edge very safely on East River.
No, that's definitely true. I know we already have a very good fire rating from the insurance houses. Will the water main improvement, is there any speculation that would further improve that rating, or is it something you guys haven't got that deep into yet?
I think that having been involved in fire ratings some years ago, I don't think it will. The fact that it may, but you're talking about fire ratings only have so many points. I mean, you're either a community that has
you're good or you're
an 8-point
bad,
rating or a 9-point rating or a 6-point rating. Not a lot of room. The fact that we fix up these mains, it may, but I think the fact is the majority of the rating is going to be based on the fact that we have a volunteer department, but we have a water system, a public water system. I don't know that it'll drop us a point where it'll make a measurable impact on people's fire insurance.
All right, and the second one you touched on, but I think it's important because I know there's always a lot of animosity on the width of West River Road. And it sounds like you're not going to, when you do the resurfacing of West River, you're not going to make it any wider. You're going to keep it the same width.
That's right. And part of the reason, Eric, is money. We just don't have the money. There's going to be a lot of drainage improvements. And now West River, we know we're going to have to go through the county, to get a permit. Because what they may want us to do with storm drainage improvements will be something we can't afford to do. We already know that. What we want to do is build the east side of the road up so it sheet flows across the surface to the west side towards the Trenton Channel. In some spots, we may have to go under it with a pipe. But, the county-wide, I'll say this time and again publicly, the Wayne County requirements for fixing their roads, not with the road division, but with the permit office, so-called, storm requirements they put on communities is very unreasonable. And, we did that little section by Westcroft Gardens where, I don't know if you're familiar, but did you see the little improvement that went in? It's just about 250, 300 feet of pavement, if you've seen it. But the reason we took it on was that several years ago, the guardrail caved in on the east side of the road. And the county put it back up. It wasn't secured. It wouldn't hold the car from going in. And underneath that road, there's a big box culvert you can actually walk through. I'm told they used to herd cattle through there to get to the Trenton Channel to drink. At any rate, we also fixed the water main through there. But that project cost our road fund about $250,000 to do that. So what we did is we extended the box culvert, put new guardrail up, extended it 6 feet on either side, made it a lot safer, built the road up where it had a big dip at the lowest point, a foot, built it up. The county, our $250,000 project was held up for 1 year and 2 months because we wouldn't agree to what they wanted us to do. And they were going to add $150,000 cost to the project. We finally, through Mr. Palomera and other people, got the permit office to back off. We made a beautiful improvement there. And we know that as far as Church Road, storm drainage is concerned, and on West River, we're going to have some issues with the county. But like Brownstown and like Romulus and other communities we're aware of, we're going to be up for the battle.
One final question.
Answered your question.
Yeah, no, it did. And one final question is, so I know we're expecting that this would be done primarily by contractors, but would the county consider bidding on this to have A, to help their coffers, and B, to maybe make this go a little bit smoother?
Heavens no. I could bring testimony in here from Livonia. Livonia's public works director, I know him very well. And they did 2 sections of 7 Mile 2 years ago. They did, and I'm going to probably have these figures a little skewed up, but I will tell you the facts. The 2 sections of 7 Mile were separated by a mile. 7 miles of Wayne County Road. So the city of Livonia said, we want to move forward on this. We haven't got your plans together. And they said, we're going to take this work section and we're going to do this mile with our own engineering staff and bid it out. In the county, you can do yours. The county, the engineering cost was under 10%, the design construction, the one that Livonia went out on their own and did it. I was told it was 33% engineering cost on the section that the county did, and it was done a whole year later. We don't want the county to have anything to do with this. They're not giving any money to us, and they will hold us up. And this section of Jefferson, it's been on their list for 2 years. It was supposed to be started July 15th. Sibley Road between Allen and the Expressway was on their list for this year. It's now on next year's list. My judgment would be we'd be foolish to let the county have anything to do with this. And they don't want to. They're fine with us doing it on our own. Except we have to get permits from them. They have to approve our plans. I hope I answered your question, but I can get you the raw testimony on that. Sounds like an indictment of Wayne County, but frankly, folks, we haven't had the cooperation that I think we deserve. Taking care of their roads, and you know, Grosse Ile is just a small little pea in the pod to them.
Well, thank you, Eric. I just have a couple of comments and a couple of questions, I guess. Just in general, Jay's point is very well taken. You can stand on principle and have terrible roads for the next 20 years, or you can deal with reality. Reality is what it is. And you have to, if that means that we spend money to fix it, then we spend money to fix it if we want to have good roads. And I think there's nobody around here that wouldn't like to see the roads significantly improved. That includes the water mains. I mean, it's the same issue. And so that's my basic perspective on it. But further, you know, Grosse Ile doesn't have a lot of people, but I think it probably has a lot of influence politically with the people who live on the island, with our representative there in Wayne County. And I would hope that you know, like you've done, you've fought through the battle to get this chip surfacing approach accepted, which is 5% of the cost of complete resurfacing. That allows us to do something. That was a battle, okay? And this issue with permits. You know, I fully hope that, you know, when you guys are dealing with the engineers who are sitting behind a desk at Wayne County and have some ridiculous spec which costs our citizens money, that you will use that political influence to fight it, because it can be fought and it can be won.
And we have, and we will.
And so, you know, that's how the citizens know that the money is being spent for something that they will actually benefit from, not from some abstract engineering concept. So, you know, I'm glad to hear you say that
John, we're not alone on this issue. Mr. Palomero is willing to step in whenever we need him. And we're going to probably need him when we do the Church Road plan. If this were to be approved to get Church Road built next year, I wouldn't want to bid Church Road in April. I want to bid it in February so we can get a better price. Contractors, once they get all their work lined up, prices are going to go up. But
Yep.
he's willing to help us on that. And we can bring in Riverview. We can bring in people from Brownstown and Romulus and other places where they're trying to do the same thing we're trying to do, and they all support the position that dealing with the county permit office is really a tough deal.
Well, Wayne County has every right to set engineering standards, but I would hope that that would be accompanied with Wayne County money.
We're
And
going to
if they're not
design
providing the
everything.
money, then back off on the specifications and
Well-
let the communities do what they otherwise would do. If we were a city, we wouldn't be worrying about those guys. Okay?
Well, that's
So-
not what happened in Livonia, and I can testify in Romulus, I know for a fact. On
Anyway.
drainage, but I would say that you make a good point. And but keep in mind, we're not going to do anything below acceptable MDOT standards.
No,
we're going
there
to
you
do
go.
everything
There's-
is going
there's
to
a
be
difference.
good standards.
There could be a difference between MDOT and Wayne County. You already have shown that. And so, you put in what's safe and what makes engineering sense, not something that's been bureaucratically enhanced.
Exactly.
I think there was an important point that you might want to touch on, and that's on this picture out here that shows this water main where the diameter has been so greatly reduced. People don't probably understand that. You have a 60-year-old water main that's been in service. Okay, it was good 10 years ago. Why isn't it good now? Well, the reason is exactly what's in this picture here. It's the calcification that takes place that basically necks down that pipe to the point where it isn't a 6-inch pipe anymore. It's a 3-inch pipe. We would run into that in industry all the time. Okay, and you can't get it out, and the only way you can deal with it is to replace it, and so people wonder about the fire protection and the pressure and the volume to get through there. You're not going to get as much through that as anywhere near what you would get to a new pipe. This is a security issue. It's a safety issue.
That's a great point. And downstairs in our lobby, John Keim, who works for the township, heads our water field group up. We had a water main break at the end of Macomb Street 2 weeks ago. Or anybody notice that the road was torn up there? In fact, Woody Clark at the last township board meeting asked when that was going to be patched, and it was patched. But so they cut out a section of the water main, and it's on display by the manager's office downstairs. When you leave here, it's sitting on top of a play rack, and it shows that 20% of that pipe is calcified. So it's an 8-inch pipe. It's been reduced by 20%. So
I think that in your future meetings, it'd be good if it could be carried, bring it around, and show people. Picture's worth 1,000 words.
right about that.
I mean, people don't know about this stuff if they haven't ever encountered it.
I think that's a great idea for the public hearing. I'm going to bring some kind of a dolly in.
I think there might also be some savings. Eric was looking for some savings from this, from insurance, but all these water main breaks we have, and water's gushing out into the street, that costs the township money. That ends up on our water bills because it's metered coming out of the island, and basically they don't care where it goes. And if it goes out in the middle of the street or down into Thoroughfare Canal, we pay for it just as though it went into a house. So, you said that, these water mains that you not only looked at flows and pressures, but you probably also looked at maintenance. In the areas where you've had frequent failures, you can improve the reliability, keep the water in the pipes, and reduce waste. What is our waste rate now? Do we know that?
Yes, it's anywhere from it varies a little bit from year to year, but we have a company come in that can check our pipes and try to determine if we have a leak that's not visible through soundings, and we did that a couple years ago. But we're at between 8 and 11% loss.
8 and 11% loss. Now, is that normal for a system this old?
Yes.
Okay.
Some are worse. Some communities are worse. We try
So
to
we
stay.
have an opportunity to make an improvement here, and maybe
Possibly, yes.
in some way reduce some of the increases we'll see in water in the future. Just by the way the bond issue is written, I assume this will show up on the property taxes. That's
Yeah.
where people will see it.
Yes.
It won't actually show up on a water bill. It's
Will not show up in a water bill at this point. I mean, if things aren't approved, we're going to have to look at other alternatives. But the answer is it'll be on the taxes.
okay. I would say that's probably about all of my comments. Relative to water and the roads. It's just, again, I'll come back to the point, and I think it's pretty unanimous. It is unanimous from this commission that you guys have done a thorough job of working through this, identifying the issues, putting a plan together, laying out a systematic approach to execute it, and now it's up to the voters. And with your communication efforts you've got going, I think you're pushing all the right buttons by getting the information out to the people. An informed voter population will, in my opinion, vote yes. But we'll see. So thank you, Bill.
Thank you
It's
for
much appreciated.
listening to me. Thank
Yes.
If you don't mind, I'd like to make one last comment.
Oh, certainly.
Sure. Mr. Costick made a great comment talking about the price of this this proposed millage, and the example of a $250,000 house, which has $125,000 in taxable value. It's like $264 per year. That is a considerable amount of money. But think about it. With your motor vehicle, if you hit a pothole, you might be replacing a tire, might be replacing a wheel, an axle. You have multiple cars within a household. This could seriously, be much higher than $264 per year. And then let's not talk about, if you have a bicyclist or a pedestrian that, falls off their bike or trips in the road and gets involved in a more serious accident. So it is a high cost, but I think it's a bargain when looking at what the alternatives are.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much.
Okay, at this point, let's move on to the next item, which is master plan presentation. The purpose for this presentation is to provide a general refresher for the commission regarding the content of the different sections of the master plan. We were required under state law every 5 years to recertify that the plan reasonably represents the current situation of Grosse Ile Township. And so we need to do that. We need to recertify the plan at some point. And in order to have an educated planning commission about this, Brian has put a presentation together. So at the end of this, 2 questions will be asked of the commission. First, are you okay going ahead and recertifying it with the information that you have? Or do you require more information? And second, if you find that you do not feel that the master plan represents the current situation in our Grosse Ile, then we need to talk about ways to change it. So those are the 2 issues. Brian, would you please step forward?
Thank you. That may very well be the longest I've been silent at a planning commission meeting. Just for the record, make sure Lori gets that on the tape.
We'll have to put that in the minutes.
Tough act to follow, so certainly thank you to Mr. Costick and his commission for all the hard work they've done, and to the commission for giving him an opportunity to come out and present on such an important topic. So there's actually a pretty decent tie-in here. Obviously, DPS Commission has been doing a lot of planning as it relates to the roads. The master plan sort of includes a transportation and a roadway component, not to the level of detail that was just presented to you, but it is actually, I think, an interesting segue into what we're going to talk about tonight. So just a little precursor, I want to remind everybody, we initiated this conversation about a year ago. We had talked about breaking the plan up into different components. This was originally going to be 2 or 3 presentations, which I have taken and sort of just crammed into one so we could try to get through all of this tonight. I got it down to about 20, 25 slides. It was originally going to be much longer than that, so I will do my best to not have this drag on too long, but I do want to remind you of that in the event you do have some questions, as John mentioned at the outset. If we want to dig deeper into any of these topics as we move forward, certainly we can do so, and I had been prepared to do so, but due to a number of delays, I thought we should try to get through all of it tonight, and I didn't want to keep you all here for 2 or 3 hours, but I've got the time if you do, so.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So, there are two primary statutory requirement or elements that apply to this particular commission. There's the Zoning Enabling Act. There's the Planning Enabling Act. The Zoning Enabling Act doesn't tie into the master plan a lot.
but there are certain provisions that do relate, and one of particular note is that if you are a community that's going to have local zoning, you must have a plan. Your zoning ordinance must be based on a plan. So technically there is a statutory requirement that you have on file an adopted plan, which, as you're all aware, you do. The Planning Enabling Act establishes planning commissioner roles, responsibilities, duties, membership, etc. One of your primary roles as a planning commission is the preparation and adoption of master plans. I have a little side note on here that under the new act, under the current act, the township board may also act as an adopting body. So should you choose to update this, or whether it's now or whether it's in the future, the township board will very likely be the final adopters of the plan. It's certainly what I would recommend you do if we ever find ourselves in that position.
That has been our practice.
Yeah, it really shows a good unity. There's really no reason not to. I haven't had many communities that decided against that. I've never really heard a good argument why you wouldn't have it go through the legislative body as well. But I just wanted to point that out, that is optional under the Planning Act. And then again, as you noted at the outset, the Planning Act also requires your review at least every 5 years. You don't have to wait the full 5 years. If something comes before you that warrants review sooner than that, you certainly can do so. Current plan dates back to 2002. The Planning Enabling Act was adopted in 2008. At that time, this 5-year review requirement, we undertook that under the new act. And then I believe it was the end of 2008, and I think it even dipped into 2009. My math could be a little fuzzy on that one, was the last time that we looked at this. We did a review with the commission. We did a presentation similar to what we'll go through tonight, and ultimately the commission determined that the plan was essentially still current, still relevant, and you passed a resolution reaffirming its being current, if you will. And then where we are today. We started talking about this sometime last year. It's carried over, and here we are tonight, potentially moving forward, and at a minimum, certainly reviewing and digging a little bit deeper. So in terms of the process, obviously review of the document, which includes the maps, a couple of which are the more useful items for a planning commission. Future land use map is one that comes up quite frequently, although we've not seen many or really any rezoning cases. It is an important document as it relates to planning commission's reviews and decision making. And which leads me to one question, just to make sure, because we have had obviously some changeover since 08-09. Do all of the commissioners have a copy of the current master plan? And I know Dan is our newest member, but I wasn't sure if that was included in your...
I can say, but at least at the time when the planning commissioners came on, the master plan is part of the package of documentation that goes to the commissioners.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure if anybody is in need of a copy, I have it electronically, or we'll have Lori run you a copy or dig in the files. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have one, or if you lose it, let us know. But assuming everybody has one, that's great. So a few of the things I want you to think about as I go through this tonight, and or as you kind of undertake your own review as you read the document. Are the goals, objectives, and policies still relevant? Are these things that the statements in the plan, do they still ring true today, or have factors changed so much that something is no longer relevant or warranted? Have we had significant changes in our demographics or our existing conditions? In other words, have we had a large influx of people? Has our population grown significantly to the point where we maybe need to make some changes or think about altering some of our future plans? Significant land use changes in the community, or any pressing concerns about development or redevelopment. We really haven't seen any sizable new development in quite a while on this island. So most of what we see are bits and pieces, site plans on Macomb Street. We did have the new subdivision several years ago, things of that nature. So I don't really know there's been anything too significant, but if there are things that ringing true in your mind, then obviously those would be points to consider as we go through this. And are your current zoning designations consistent with what's laid out in your master plan, in particular in your future land use map? Again, any changes there, anything that is altered since we last reviewed this that might warrant looking into the plan a little bit deeper. So similar to what the chairman stated at the outset, following this presentation and discussion, Commission will need to determine if an update or an amendment to your current plan is necessary. If you believe it is, then we would do one of two things. We would pick something to dive a little bit deeper into, talk a little bit more about it, or you could say, you know what, this plan needs to be updated, at which point then we would work with administration and the township board to initiate an update to your master plan. If you do not believe that an update is necessary at this time, then we would do similar to what we did last time, which would be have you reaffirm the plan as being current and still being relevant to your needs and the needs of the residents of this community. So what I did is I basically just have a slide or two or three on each chapter. I just wanted to keep this as kind of an outline focus. That way everybody can kind of go through, and I can even send you this, or I can give you a handout if it helps you kind of navigate the plan on your own if you want to go through and make some of your own notes. So your introductory chapter, really not a lot to it. It's a description of the purpose of a master plan, pretty basic stuff, the legal basis of your plan. At the time your plan was originally adopted, it was the Township Planning Act. Upon adoption of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, that changed. So that's something that is new, at least in terms of your O2 plan. It lays out the process that was undertaken, evaluation of existing conditions, a number of public involvement sessions or opportunities that ultimately led to the compilation of that plan. And it also includes a comparison of master plan to zoning ordinance. This is something we typically like to put in our master plans up front, because a lot of times there's confusion about what a master plan is versus what a zoning ordinance is. At its bare bones, the master plan is your future, your long-range guide, whereas your zoning ordinance is your day-to-day law. In essence, that is what you can and cannot do as of today. And then the master plan ideally helps you determine what you want to be or how you want to get there within a 5 to 10 to 20-year time frame. Chapter 2 is one of these, the items that we probably use more than others. Anytime we have a request for special land use, we'll look to the goals and objectives to make sure that it's consistent with your plan as well as the future land use map. Your goals and objectives chapter breaks down into a few different categories. We have residential, we have Macomb Street, we have Airport Commerce Park, natural features, transportation, public facilities, and recreation. I've put on my slides only the goals and the objectives within each of these objectives. So the goal is the sort of the overarching idea. The objectives are smaller elements intended to achieve that goal. Within each of these objectives in your plan, there are a number of recommendations or action strategies to help achieve each of these items. So I'm not going to do these all verbatim. I can if you want. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. But you can see some of them on here. I will point out a few of them. So an objective of preserving the quality character of your residential neighborhoods is to ensure infill developments consistent with established character of the neighborhood. One of the action items within that objective was to evaluate your lot coverage and your floor area regulations, which is something we have done. We've also provided for a number of residential design standards within Article 3 of your zoning ordinance. So just to give you an idea of sort of the hierarchy of goal being the most general, objective being slightly less general, and then the action strategies being rather specific items to achieve each of these particular statements. Macomb Street, again, similar in that it has a general goal to what is it here, to have the Macomb Street as the center, the focus of the township in terms of commercial uses, wants to provide for a complementary mixture of uses, very much in line with the intent of the Macomb Street District, which we've discussed quite a lot, at least in terms of our site plan reviews. Some of the objectives, maintaining a pedestrian scale in terms of the design and layout of Macomb Street, making sure that the character is consistent and compatible, be that through architecture or building materials or site design elements. Could be site lighting, could be landscaping, could be parking lot location, whether it's in a side yard or a rear yard, which is sort of an overarching goal of this chapter. Actually, we'll get to that a little more later because Macomb Street has its own specific chapter as far as the plan goes, too. Goal and objective for Airport Commerce Park, make sure to maintain, upgrade facilities, trying to promote economic development within the airport and the Commerce Park. Natural features, obviously, a very important theme of this community and throughout this particular plan. Protecting the sensitive natural features, ways that we can go about that, specifically identified wetlands, woodlands, drainage ways, and shorelines, which really all do contribute quite significantly to the character of this particular community and one of the reasons why it's such a desirable place to live. Transportation. Mr. Kostick is doing a wonderful job in terms of trying to provide for a safe and well-maintained system for motorized and non-motorized transportation elements. Both are called out in this plan, which actually, going back all the way to 2002, is pretty good that the non-motorized element was as significant as it was pushing 13 years ago at this point in time. Public facilities, pretty generic statement, but continue to provide high-quality services and facilities, be they fire, police in terms of services, or be they water, sanitary in terms of facilities, And then lastly, recreation, basically providing a broad range of recreational opportunities for the residents of this particular community. And I don't remember what the commission is named anymore, the Park and Rec Commission, or it seems like it's changed a few times. I'm looking at Eric in case he remembers. But
The Recreation Commission.
Recreation Commission actually has its own 5-year plan. I don't know that we do have a couple of new people. Some of you would have been on here the last time that came through, but we do. Every 5 years, the township does update its Parks and Rec master plan, which is a separate component from the overall master plan. And part of that process is typically a presentation to the commission and endorsement of the plan by the commission as part of that review process. But for those who were not here the last time, just something to be aware of. And I think that 5 years is actually coming up in maybe the next year or so. So that'll be something you'll probably be seeing within the next year. Chapter 3, demographics, existing conditions. I just, again, pulled some of the highlights here. Since the 2000 census, your population has dropped slightly. I don't know that I would call it significant in terms of its change. A couple of interesting points, which are not unexpected in the least. Your population age 65 and older continues to grow at a pretty rapid pace. Meanwhile, your population 18 years and younger has continued to decline, albeit not nearly at the same rate that your senior residents have increased. So there's a bit of a change. The demographic of the people in this community, it is changing. We are getting older. That's not uncommon, and quite frankly, aside from the specifics of the actual numbers, those are statements that I probably would make in most of the communities I work with. Most of the plans I've done, seniors are on the rise. It's not just a Groseal issue. It's not just a Wayne County issue. It's not just a Michigan issue. That's nationwide. That's just what's happening. So it was noted in your current plan, so at least there was some identification that we saw this coming many years ago. So there are some provisions in there to help try to address that in terms of providing for different types of housing, be it cluster options, be it attached units, be it some townhouses on Macomb Street or something a little bit higher density, such that when you have residents who have the 7,000 square foot house on 5 acres, they're able to basically stay in the community when they can no longer maintain those large homes on those large lots. They still have the ability to move somewhere else within the community. And I put the 2040 forecast down on the bottom part of the screen, and you can see that the projections are really just very slight declines over the course of the next 20 to 25 years. So actually maintaining relatively steady, at least as the SEMCOG forecast goes. Chapter 4 is the historical setting. There's not really a lot to this chapter. I don't have a lot to add. It identifies areas of both local and state significance historically. There are some, I believe there are some local designations. I think there's some state designated sites in terms of their historical significance. They're really, to the best of my knowledge, since this plan was adopted in 2002, I don't recall anything having been added to this list. I can't think of anything that would be new. So in essence, I just showed you the map because it's a decent looking map from 2002, and it gave me something to talk to. But I don't believe there's been any changes that would affect that particular chapter. Chapter 5, existing land use, similar to things we've already talked about and things I think you already know intuitively by living here. It's predominantly a residential community, number of natural features, lots and lots of open space, be it recreation type facilities or be it protected and preserved open spaces. Not a ton of change expected within your existing land uses. I tried to do my best to analyze across a few different sectors. So what I'm showing you here is the upper left is from the current plan. It was, granted it's 20 years old now, but it was a pie chart, and quite a nice pie chart, I might add, for 1995. That's pretty good. I was still an undergrad at that time, so that's about as good as graphics were back then. And you can see, again, this just reiterates predominantly open space, predominantly residential. Those are your two primary land uses. I threw in, to try to make some comparisons, some more data from SEMCOG, try to make sure Mr. Pollack gets some feedback here, get some good publicity for SEMCOG and all the hard work those folks do to give us all this wonderful data. So the upper right is a land cover breakdown, and I put this in there really because you can see with the trees in the open space being such large segments of your actual ground cover, your land cover within the township. And then I also put in the land use table by size and percentage. This data was from 2008. It was the most recent we could find. And again, what you'll see, the thing I want to jump out at you is really, single-family residential being the predominant land use again. The one thing I have to point out between these three tables is these are not apples-to-apples comparisons. So what might have been considered open space, woodland, wetland in the pie chart probably is considered either some form of agricultural or residential or park recreation open space. It's probably split up amongst the other categories, which is why you won't see a 46% on this table for open space, but you will see a number of other items that, generally my expectation would add up similarly. If we were to do a similar chart today, I don't think we would see significant change in terms of the land use makeup of the community. Future land use. I mentioned earlier this is another important component of the plan that the Planning Commission will see from time to time. It is one of the primary tools we will use on a rezoning review, were we to ever have one. I don't think we have in quite a while. I can't remember one off the top of my head anyway. But basically, again, predominantly residential, Macomb Street, is planned as Macomb Street based on the Macomb Street chapter. The open space was all planned as such. The existing open space remained in the plan for the future. The public open space that is essentially intended to be open space in perpetuity, or at least until some major change were to occur in terms of a vote of the residents, which I don't think any of us would foresee that occurring. So those are, I believe in this plan, I believe the areas identified as public open space were just the existing open spaces at that time. So that is something that has probably changed a little bit in the time since the plan was adopted. Chapter 7, residential neighborhoods. This lays out a number of distinct residential types throughout the township, from the traditional interior residential, which are kind of our older subdivisions, the natural interior, which are the larger lots with large wooded areas, potentially some wetland areas as well. Waterfront, pretty self-explanatory. The traditional island is kind of in the south end, sort of the older, at the time, some of the, maybe the more cottage-style dwellings, your Elba Island, your Hickory Island, which obviously we've seen a lot of change on Hickory. Those aren't cottages that are going up there for new houses anymore. But again, it's still, it's that traditional kind of how the island started to develop. Our residential along the canal being distinct from our river waterfront lots, and then also some multiple family designations with some of the condos off of Meridian, and then also some of the multiple family off of Macomb Street. Brings me to Chapter 8. So Macomb Street has its own chapter in the plan, was, again, many years ago, very well thought out. In my opinion, I didn't work on that plan, so I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I tries to, the goal of creating Macomb Street as your focal point, your sort of your downtown, if you will, in terms of the uses, the character, the design. We're looking for not just commercial, we're looking for other types of residential to blend in, be they upper floor residential above a commercial, or be they like the senior housing development from several years ago, where you can have a maybe an older generation. Again, it's a place for the 65 and olders to go, while trying to create a walkable downtown type of scene where people have easy access to goods and services. They don't have to leave the island to go to the drugstore to fill a prescription, whatever the case might be. They can walk out the front door, down the sidewalk, and right to the store. The design standards are a very important component of this particular section. Most of these, if not all, have been incorporated into the Macomb Street district in your zoning ordinance, but obviously looking for consistent setbacks, the idea of pushing the buildings forward, pulling the parking back or to the side, not having the predominant look of parking lots in front yards as you drive down the street. Trying to keep things at a sort of pedestrian scale that ties into keeping the buildings forward. We only allow 2 stories in Macomb Street, so we're not allowing super tall buildings. We do require sidewalks. We've had conversations more recently about providing some sidewalk and some. I know the DDA has worked, and I think even the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee on some different street furniture ideas. I know we've talked a lot about bike racks. I know the DDA's worked on some benches and the street lighting for Macomb Street, as well as the pocket parks, which have come up more recently with some of the properties along Macomb Street. Parking location I touched on, building design and architecture, so there's another big element of this plan that again ties into your current Macomb Street zoning district. Natural features, I don't really know that I have much to add on this one. This map likely has changed some, probably not significantly. We know that there's a number of sensitive environmental features in this particular township. I think you've done a lot to protect them over the course of time, make them real amenities, whether they're usable or not, whether they're just merely preserved as environmental features, such that they serve that purpose, or whether they're actually usable features for the residents. On transportation, so I put a few items in here. This is one of the maps in terms of the data collection that is pretty dated. These are your traffic counts in different along roadway segments and throughout the township. Most of these counts, I think, are from anywhere from 1999 to 2001. Whether or not these are even remotely close to what exists today, the truth of the matter is I couldn't tell you right now. I really don't know that. I don't know if Bill, is Wayne County or has DPS done any more recent traffic counts? Okay. All right. I might suggest, Mr. Chair, whether it's for this particular element, or maybe even just for our own information or knowledge, I think it might be good to have staff work with Bill or with the DPS Commission. Maybe we can obtain those counts and we could do a quick comparison at those certain intersections or along those certain roadways. At least it would give us something a little bit newer to look at. I'm not suggesting that this needs to change or that you need to update your entire master plan just based on old traffic counts. But it would be not a bad exercise to know whether in the last 15 years traffic conditions have changed significantly or not. Bill might even off the cuff know. He's done talking for the night. It's okay. I don't blame you. And then I put these two in particular, knowing that that Bill was going to be here tonight too. So map 8 within the transportation chapter is a list of road conditions. Again, this is an older map. DPS Commission's obviously done, and staff, not just the commission, obviously has done a great job of evaluating and analyzing the conditions of your roadways and maintaining a current up-to-date log, which you've seen generated into to a very detailed plan for future improvements. And then map 9 is the bike path system, which at the time, that's what it looked like. I know that we now have a bicycle and pedestrian commission. There's too many words for me, but I know that Brian's on it. I know that Eric was involved in it as well. So basically, the way I view this is both of these plans are a bit out of date, certainly in terms of these maps. However, I view DPS as having a much more up-to-date version of Map 8, and I believe that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission has a much more up-to-date version of Map 9. So it's not that planning for any of these items has stopped. These have been ongoing, continuous elements. It's just that they've not necessarily been incorporated into your overall master plan. And then, I'm almost done, guys. It's Chapter 11, community facilities, pretty self-explanatory, just a description of your other items, be they governmental facilities or non-governmental, but educational / religious facilities. One thing I put in here, because I wasn't sure about this one, was the use of the shared library service with City of Trenton. Is that still, Township still has that relationship with Trenton? Okay, so that's still current. Talks about the recreational facilities within the Township, and then a pretty old-fashioned standby line is to continue to provide safe and efficient public services. Come on. Of course. All right. So Chapter 12, closing chapter of your plan, implementation. It's broken down across 3 different topics. The first is development regulations. So these are, in essence, for the most part, items that have been or would be implemented through your zoning ordinance. Some of these items, let me see if I can pull a good one here. Side and rear yard parking requirements on Macomb Street. That is now a requirement in the Macomb Street district. That was a recommendation of your original plan. So that item has been addressed and been implemented. Woodlands protection, you do have a woodlands protection ordinance. Excuse me, it's outside of your zoning code. It's its own standalone chapter, but we certainly have a number of protections for those particular items. specific township initiatives. The one I'll point out would be to develop pocket parks along Macomb Street, something that the DDA has been working on. So I know that that is an item that is kind of an ongoing implementation or action item that originally came out of this plan. And then transportation with kind of some ongoing standards of maintaining roadways, tying in again to what Mr. Kostick presented to you earlier tonight. And potentially reviewing and improving intersections or roadways that are poor level of service or where there are safety problems. My guess is that your proposed road improvement project would help to improve most of those conditions if there are any unsafe intersections or roadways out there, which there probably aren't many on this island anyway. So here's my summary. Goals, objectives, policies, my opinion, those still appear to be relevant as far as I'm concerned. The work that I've done with you all as a commission, the work that I've done with staff, reviewing this plan, those particular line items, I don't see where any of those are just so off the wall that they no longer pertain to this community. Existing land use and demographics have changed, but I don't believe they've changed significantly since your last plan was adopted. If the only thing you were going to do in a plan update was update your demographics and your existing conditions, I would advise you to not do that. It's not really worth the time or the effort, in my opinion. If you wanted to do something, you need to dig into the meat of it, the goals, the recommendations, the action strategies. I don't see anything in existing land use or demographics that have changed so severely that it ultimately alters your goals or your future implementation strategies personally. In terms of your future land use plan, the future land use designations and the map, in my opinion, still remain compatible with your current zoning designations. I've noted throughout this there are some components that are quite clearly dated, the transportation chapter being one in particular. All of the old references to the Township Planning Act, obviously those give the plan a bit of a dated feel. And I believe we've had some additional public open space added over the course of the last 13 years. Those are just a few of the obvious ones. There's a few other things in here. There are some implementation strategies that have been completed. However, a lot of them are ongoing actions, and I don't believe you would want to remove them even if you were to update the plan. And so in general, it's my opinion, the plan and its recommendations still remain relevant. I don't believe an amendment is necessary at this time. That's just one man's opinion. What I did note as my closing point, though, is I do think that this is something we'll want to start thinking about in the future. And I mean that for a couple of purposes. One is for the timing of a plan update or a potential plan update. The other is for the budgeting of a potential plan update. This was originally intended as a 10 to 20 year plan. We are in approximately year 13 or 14 of that plan. The course of the next 5 years, there's certainly the potential, I think, for either some change to occur or just quite frankly, if we hit that 20-year mark, I think it's probably time to open that plan up for an update. So I put that idea forth now with this commission, with Eric obviously as our township board rep, and I've had this conversation with Dale as well, that not this year, in my opinion, probably not next year, the next 2 years, but I do think within this next 5-year review cycle, I think at some point it would probably be wise to start budgeting for a plan update that we would certainly look for you to do at around that 20-year mark, or maybe a little bit sooner, depending on how we're going to look at that in terms of the next 3, 4, 5 years. So that's my closing point. I'm done, Mr. Chair. Oh, don't do that. Well, I told you my original presentations were probably about 70 slides or so I did my best to to condense this down. And I still took a solid 35 minutes. So.
Well, then at this point.
Sure.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Interestingly enough, one of the first things I remember working on the Planning Commission was this master plan in 2002. And the chief concern at the time was overgrowth, overdevelopment, and preservation of the character of the island. That was it was kind of right in the aftermath, I think, of the 3,000 square foot overlay. And those sorts of things. Significant open space purchases were taking place at that time, both through the township and through the Conservancy. And that was really the direction everybody was headed at the time. And that was the first time I heard a concern raised by the school district. Actually, it was Collie Hooper Yan. Came to one of the meetings to prepare for it, and she was concerned about over restriction and kind of zoning out young families from the island. And the fire department had the same concern, zoning out the volunteer firemen. And so that concern really has animated a lot of my decision making since then. That keeps ringing in my head that we are here to promote growth as well as to preserve the natural character of the island. And so as I look at the master plan and some of the things, I don't think there's anything that I would disagree with in any of the goals and objectives of the master plan. I think the emphasis, though, is different than I think where a lot of the community is today. I think we all want to do all those same things. We want to preserve, we want to protect, we want to do all those things. But I think there's maybe a little bit of a change in emphasis that I'm hearing from a lot of community members that, more people is good. You look at those SEMCOG projections of declining. I mean, that declining population means declining property values, or at least not accelerating the way we would like them to. The equivalent of those back 2002, I think, was the opposite direction. It was for, continued growth, explosion of population. We were concerned about the infrastructure being able to maintain, being able to sustain the island and that sort of thing. I think we ought to be concerned about that as we go forward, and whether that means reopening the master plan and incurring costs, which I don't want to do. I think it's probably something we don't do at this point, but I think it's something we need to think about whether there's something we could do that's a half measure towards that or something along those lines. So that's one of my concerns here. One of the things that I wanted to consider as we raise this and decide what to do. The other is I think there may be I have some concerns about the consistency between the master plan and the general statements that we make and some of the specific objectives of the individual commissions and committees and other community organizations. I think of Macomb Street goals and objectives and the DDA. I recently resigned from the DDA for reasons not having to do with any frustrations, but the concern there is I'd sit and I'd listen to some of the viewpoints of the DDA members, and in many cases I think we still, as a planning commission, feel pretty good about the decisions that we made back then about rear and side parking and that sort of thing. And there are DDA members, and whether it's the consensus of the DDA or not, but there are definitely DDA members who think that that's a terrible idea and it should be on-street parking, and we need to redo all of Macomb Street to do on-street parking. And so, their objectives are in many ways similar to ours, and they have different views. And it'd be interesting to kind of revisit some of those plans individually between the commissions like the DDA, the Recreation Department, Airport and Commerce Park, the natural resources discussion there with some of the organizations, transportation, DPS, and bike and pedestrian, things like that. I just think that there are, the master plan, I think, is all things that we agree with almost entirely, maybe some minor issues, but maybe soliciting some opinions from some others. That sounds like an expensive proposition. I'm not sure I want to reopen and do all that. So, is there some way we can organize even just a review of these things, joint meetings between, say, the Planning Commission or a subcommittee of the Planning Commission with the DDA or with the Rec Department or, things like that to kind of go through the master plan and see if there are things that they would recommend for change there. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm hesitant to recommend that we reopen this and incur a lot of expense that nobody wants to do. But I am wondering if there's any way to accommodate some of these concerns without doing that. So that's what I had.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Steve.
Definitely thank you for that 40-minute presentation. I wasn't counting, though. When all's said and done, I will say I completely disagree with you on a certain point. I do think it is time to put this into the next budget to fully open up and to reevaluate the entire plan. I think if we wait another 2-3 years to then put it into a budget to go through a 12-month process, 18-month, however long this takes, I think too much time is going to go by. We're seeing a lot of things changing pretty quick. We had a great presentation earlier that I hope the township people support with the roads and the water system. There's a lot of other demographics changing on the island that I think this plan does need to be opened up, because at the end of the day, it may be, and I can't remember, it may be 18 months down the road when a new plan is finalized after the new budget season kicks off. So we're looking at 2 years down the road anyways, which I don't think we should wait. Put it in the budget, spend the money, get the people around the table, invite the community, and open this plan back up and make sure that we're doing a very good pulse check on where the priorities are and go forward from there. That is my opinion.
Thank you, Steve. Jim.
Thank you for the presentation. I remember we had talked about this a year ago, having this discussion about the master plan. So I've always had it in the back of my head. I've been thinking about it over time. As you mentioned, it was a 10 to 20-year plan. We're 13 years into it. I'm of the view that we could probably go longer. Through the presentation that you had, I think that we're still okay at this point in time. If we wait 2-3 years and then consider opening up at that point in time, I haven't seen significant changes. So I'm fine with the way it is at this point in time.
Thank you, Jim. Go to Mr. Ranka.
Yeah, so in general, I'm fine with it as well. I think we've done a good job of updating the zoning ordinances along the way to keep up with this plan. We didn't really highlight that here very well. I, too, was on with Jay back in '02 and John from this commission as well when we went through and redid this. I think if you go chapter by chapter, there a lot has changed on the island. I don't know that there's enough to warrant going through this entire thing. So if you go chapter by chapter and if you look at the main objectives, I think we're pretty much still in where we need to be. So I think it's probably better to budget this in the future. I don't think it would be a bad idea to update the some of the components that are in here. I think that would be a relatively minor thing to do, right? Some of the maps, the open space, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission, re-reference the DPS stuff.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just the trick with that, Eric, just so you know, is once we open it up, we have to go through the entire process outlined in the Act. Could it be done multiple times? Sure. I would almost encourage you to do it once and do it right, though, if that makes sense. That's why I wouldn't typically encourage my communities to open up the plan to just update existing conditions. It really isn't, to me, it's not worth it. If you want to reevaluate your future land uses, you want to reevaluate your goals and objectives, you want to identify some new implementation strategies, some new action items, by all means, move forward at that point. But just to update the references to the Act, to update some maps with some, change a few colors here and there from residential to open space or whatever it is. I don't know that I would undertake that whole process, because the process entails public involvement. It entails the required review period. It's still going to be a 6 to 12 month process just to update individual components, like in that fashion.
Gotcha. So it's not just
it's just
not just revving this and
Correct.
reaffirming
It's
it.
unfortunate. Well, fortunately or unfortunate, depends on how you look at it. But it's not. The undertaking is not as simple as simply amending an ordinance, for instance. Where we go through, we talk about it a couple of times, we have a public hearing, and boom, we pass it up to the board. The process is much more involved than that and much more time-consuming to update the plan. So I would really, if you were going to initiate a plan update, I would want you to hit the nuts and bolts and not just kind of the high level
All right,
stuff.
so that says I don't think there's enough issue with the nuts and bolts to go back after that. Certainly, the budgeting process starts in February. We still do a township one-year budget. However, it's still probably prudent to start talking about it this year, whether it makes it in for next year or 2 years or 3 years, or at least we get it on the table and we keep figuring that out. Probably would be nice to know. We don't have to know it right now, but what the process cost would be to do that, right?
Sure. Yeah, and again, that's obviously something we would work with you. I can give you and Dale a ballpark, depending on, but obviously it's going to be scope specific.
Yeah, for sure.
It really. I have communities with very very little money and very little to do in a plan update, but the reality is their plans are so old and so dated. They really have no choice, but there's really nothing going on there.
Yeah, so just to bring up the speed, and Dale or Jay, what was it, about an 18-month or maybe even a 2-year period when we first did this, right? So several open houses, lots of public involvement, lots of newspaper ads, lots of public hearings, lots of debate, right? So it is a pretty big process. All right, that's it for me.
Brian.
Well, I want to thank Professor Borden for that great presentation. I think he did a great job of showing that things haven't changed that much. But I need to ask the question, is that what we want? Do we want things to stay exactly the same? We're seeing a slow downward trend within our households and with our population. Anecdotally, I can say that Macomb Street is starting to fail. Lots of businesses are going out. Anecdotally, I know that the schools are having issues with finances as well with student enrollment. And, again, anecdotally, know that there is a larger need for affordable housing. We have aging households, and there is, studies that have gone on with like the Congress of New Urbanism, with the Michigan Housing Department, showing that in the future that there is going to be a glut of single-family housing. And what is majority of our island? Single-family housing. So it might not be the next 5 years, it might not be the next 10 years, but at some point when Gen Xers are looking to downsize their houses, and because they'll be getting up there in age, don't want to take care of it, can they afford to stay within Grosse Ile? And are they going to be able to sell their house? Because based on current trends, there's not going to be a demand for it. So we could potentially see another, housing crisis in the future. So, based on that, and along with, issues with the rec plan updates, the bike ped plan, open space has been looking to acquire stuff. I asked, can we afford the actual status quo at this time? I know, for an example, with open space, I love open space. Don't get me wrong, and I don't want to sound like I'm antagonistic about what's happened on Grosse Ile. Grosse Ile is a great place. That's why I moved here. I just, worry about it. And I wonder, taking so much land off the tax rolls, has there been any budget, any projections shown that what's the impact of that? What is the opportunity costs? With Macomb Street, we want to be more walkable. We want to be more bikeable. We want to create a sense of place and do placemaking. I know that Wally Posiak has talked about, trail towns. We're talking about, creating that synergy. And Macomb Street's great, but it is vast. And you're walking down one strip. When we talk about walkability, we want to be able to radiate out. So, where do you go on either side of Macomb Street itself to create those, nodes along Macomb Street? I just don't see it at this time. We are within the wildlife refuge. There's been, talk about enhancing, the wildlife refuge is a great marketing standpoint. We've got all this, kayaking potential routes. So not only can we be a trail town from the bicycling and pedestrian side, which, by the way, we are on the Governor Showcase Trail, i.e. the Iron Bell Trail that goes from Ironwood, Wisconsin, wraps down, comes down to Groseal, and then goes its way up to Belle Isle. That's another marketing opportunity there. But we can do it for walking, we can do it for biking, we can do it for kayaking and paddling. I know that there's been issues with different parts of our residents talking about the need for a pool, this is the need of the splash pad. I'm not coming down on any side on that, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of things going on. In my mind, I'm thinking, back at the back to Macomb Street. What's the future of the large parcel with the post office? We've been hearing about USPS, downsizing a lot in the future. Is that a property that they want? Have we talked about visioning to, maybe we can basically do some sort of charrettes and figure out how do we vision Macomb Street? Can we incorporate different things in there? And then, are we benchmarking ourselves against other places that we want to emulate or what we consider other communities across Southeast Michigan? So not just downriver, but what is Chelsea doing? What is Dexter doing? What is Rochester doing? There's a variety of communities out there that are trail towns, water towns, that have the same sort of small world feel, but are creating different aspects of economic development. So I think that we kind of need to open this up. I don't know if it's right now or in the near future, but I am more in the camp of the near future to look at what ways can we do smart growth and put density in place on the island to help Macomb Street, to help the schools, to create more wealth for all of us, but do it in a smart way that preserves the character of Groseal. And I'm off my soapbox.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Boggs.
The one area that I'd like to look at, and several commission members have also brought up, was the Macomb district. Just reading through the goals of that district, trying to be a walkable downtown area, I don't feel that the current plan supports that. I think there's a lot of other ways that we can improve that and make it more walkable. Just the landscape separation required between the different businesses, along with the parking lots. If you take all that into account, pretty soon these buildings are pretty far apart, and I don't think it works well for a walkable downtown. And I don't want to see the whole island heavily populated, but it would be nice to have a downtown area that the people on the island can enjoy.
Thank you. As far as my opinion on this, I think that this plan, while created in 2002, still predominantly represents the vision of the community, recognizing that when we put the plan together, it was a balance between competing interests. There were interests, as Jay said, about schools. There were interests for wanting more people on the island. There were other interests that were dead set against any growth on the island. And what we did in setting the vision for the community for 20 years, for the last not quite 20 but 15, was to balance all of these things with all the input we've got and to prepare a plan that allowed us then to execute the zoning ordinances, which each one of us have been applying to the applicants coming through. And since that time, we've made some rather significant changes in the zoning ordinance, consistent with the way we saw things changing and things needing to be applied. But yet still, every one of those changes you could tie right back to the vision that we put in the master plan. And so, yes, the master plan right now is a static document from 2002. However, in our applying it to the zoning ordinance changes we've made, we've managed to keep current. And every time we run zoning ordinances through here, it's passed the test. What is the test? It's that from our commission standpoint, it makes good planning sense and is supportable. And then it goes to our legislative body, our board of directors, who has basically the overall responsibility for this community. And everyone we've sent forward has been consistent with their thinking for this community as well. So we are not detached from the community, and the zoning ordinance, changes reflect that. And those are all tied right back to the master plan, which we're talking about tonight. So I'm for it right now the way it is. But, I agree with the recommendation. 20 years rolls around. There was a reason why it ended up in 2002. It's because we wanted to have census data. Okay? That was an important component for understanding what was going on our island. And we incorporated that into it. So I would suggest that probably, 2 or 3 more years down the road, when the board, has an opportunity to plan for an expenditure of, what was it, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000? It was a lot of money, okay? It was not something that you just ran on a $5,000 budget. The costs from the planning consultant standpoint were high. There was a lot of time involved in work in your department and your organization. And by the way, the person who did that was your colleague, Mr. Strader, who did excellent work. So you just complimented your boss. Good move. Anyway.
Self-preservation.
Yes. So, I would like to see us recertify this plan now. There's no reason not to do that. And in my direction, my opinion is that we take this to the next level, in 2 or 3 years when we have a chance to organize and plan it, pull in the people that we need to pull in, follow the process that's outlined by the law, basically, and execute it. And in 2002, we'll have a new plan. As I recall, the plan that we updated in 2002 came from 1982. So, 20 years is not all that unheard of. Those are my comments. So at this point, I'll throw it open for. Yes, if you want to come to the microphone again.
Bill Kostick, Marquette Street. I just wanted to offer a couple thoughts.
Please.
It was a very nice presentation, and I enjoyed all your comments. So whenever you do decide to do it, just a couple thoughts I have. One is I'd like to see more condominium for this aging population that I'm in. We have a lot of wonderful condominiums, and the condominium market is pretty hot. There aren't very many vacancies, so that could fill a need, and whether you use old open space properties or something, but when you redo it, I'd like you to consider that. I mean, it seems to me there's a need for that, and it's a pretty popular form of housing. I always liked my own yard, but now that I'm older, John, I would consider that. When you redo the master plan, some of the communities that I am involved in, Brian, they do something, have a chapter on something about community image, attractiveness, economic development opportunities. What's the image of the community? And I think Eric would know that, I'm a good complainer about roadside maintenance and how our guardrails are all rusted out. And when we fix the roads, I hope to fix all those things up. We have beautiful scenery and everything here, especially with the Trenton Channel and the river. And we haven't had the resources to take care of it because it's really a county responsibility. Here I go about the county again, but I think this whole image thing is an important factor to roll into this, even though a lot of your goals are consistent with that. So to me, that's an important factor, this whole community attractiveness and image thing. And then finally, when we did our study, we looked for, as the debt of the township, when's it going to drop so that we could wait maybe for our road millage? Well, it doesn't drop until there's a $1 million drop in debt in 2024. But in 2025, it's $2 million. We have $3 million a year in debt. So 2/3 of the debt would go away in the year 2025. And I just offer that. I have a chart I can give you, John, but as you think about, I know you're not into projects, but just planning, that's a significant thing for the financial health of the township. So just thought I'd offer those things.
Certainly is big money. Thank you for your comments. Other comments? Okay. Bring it back to the table, and again, we have a couple of decisions to make, and this is again by vote. So the first is to recertify or not recertify the master plan as required by the state. I would entertain a motion.
So I move that we recertify the existing plan.
We have a motion from Eric. Is there support?
I support.
We have support from Jay. Is there discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry, discussion?
I was going to say, again, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. I think the amount of time it takes to go through this plan and to do it correctly, I think waiting a number of years is just going to push this thing out too far. I do feel we need to act now. I think we do need to open it up for a full review. Hopefully, it gets put into the budget. Again, this is the assumption, if it gets put into the budget. What if in your recommendation to look at 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we can't get this expense into that budget, and then it's put out to another year and to another year? This is similar to our roads. We have to own the fix. We can't just assume that everybody's on the same page. Look at the last township board meeting. Not everybody's on the same page. We are the decision makers up here to help make an impact on this township. This is one of those capacities. By saying, let's just let this thing ride tonight, we don't know when it'll come back before us again. But if we agree, now is the time to open it back up, then it goes up to the township board for an approval, disapproval, with it in the budget for next year, and they can be part of that decision too. But it gets me nervous pushing these things down the path. It really does.
Thank you. Additional discussion.
The only thing that I'll add is, however the vote goes, it'll go to the township board, all right? So if it's voted affirmative, the township board will then take the act to reaffirm it, right? And so that's one more place for public comment. Another thing we can do at that point, right, is we can then begin the process of putting this in the budget. So as a liaison, I can certainly bring that back to the board, the comments and concerns, right? So the recommendation is going to be what it is, and there can be discussion about it at the board level as well.
Additional discussion.
Yeah, can I get ask for a clarification from Eric on that? So if we were to say we think we should just certify, that would go to the township board as well, or only if we vote that we want to request funds and restudy?
Well, so it depends on how you want the motion right now would go as it was written, right? We would move to recertify, right? And then my plan would be to have the discussion of, hey, we need to be planning for this, right? It's going to take a couple of years to get it done. So that would be either discussion, or if we wanted to amend, change the amendment, then we could change the amendment, or change the motion rather.
Yeah, I guess what I would, I don't know if this is more complicated discussion or if this is when this discussion is supposed to take place, but I think what I would look for is, because I think Steve makes an excellent point, if we wait 2 or 3 years to bring it up and then it takes a year to get it into the budget, and then it's an 18 to 24 month study, we're looking at a new plan 6 years from now, which may be more than we want to wait. I would suggest a step in between where we study whether we think we need a plan, and that would be maybe some of these discussions with the groups, discussions with the township board. I think I like your idea of raising it to the township board to see what the mood of the legislative body is. So I think I would vote tonight, based on the discussion we have, to recertify, but then to begin a discussion as to whether or not we want to try to get this in the budget for next year and start to roll that forward. So if that's the motion that's on the table that we're voting on, I'm going to vote to recertify, but to begin the discussion right away for when we would.
So this is a friendly amendment to the motion. Is it accepted?
Can you read the motion back?
Yeah, I mean, the friendly amendment that I'm proposing would be that we recertify tonight, but then to begin a discussion with other stakeholders and internally about the right timing and process and need for further study.
Okay, that's the proposed friendly amendment to the motion. Eric, you made the original motion. Is that something you want to accept at this point or not?
Yes, I can accept that.
Okay, we had a second from Jim. Is that acceptable to you, Jim?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so that motion is now in place. Have you got that, Brian?
Sure.
Okay, additional discussion.
I'll say that, I understand where Steve's coming from, and I worried about sitting on our hands for too many years. And I'm just wondering, I think it's nice about the compromise of saying begin discussion, but what does that specifically mean? And is there things that we can do? I know that Mr. Boardman was saying that you got to be careful not to open the thing up because you don't want to do piecemeal. But are there separate components that we can begin to have community dialogue to get the actual visioning session going? Because I think that this, from a land use standpoint, looking at does our zoning actions reflect our future land use plan as it is right now? I understand that it does seem to be still okay. But again, as far as the vision for the community, what do we want? Is it sustainable? What are the benchmarks of other communities? I don't think we're there. So if there's other things that we can be doing and that we will plan on doing, then I can get behind recertification. But other than that, I think I'd have to vote no.
Thank you. A question for you, Brian. Recertification has nothing to do whatsoever with whether we decide to reopen some or all or none of the master plan. Recertification is a requirement of the state that says what you've got right now basically represents the community. I don't think anybody would say that this doesn't basically represent the community. The things I've heard about are things that are adjustments or tweaks around the edges, not necessarily a 50% change as saying that the master plan is wrong. I think we are still required by the state to do something.
We've conducted the 5-year review, which is required, and essentially what we're trying to do is document that you've done that and that you've deemed it current. So that's the intent of the motion. I think it's also important to add, it doesn't preclude you from doing other things in the future, and it doesn't preclude you from preparing to initiate an amendment within the next budget cycle if that's what the board so chooses. So, and it doesn't preclude you from undertaking other studies. My recommendation is merely that to undergo a master plan update and to go through the full process outlined in the statute merely to update things like demographics and existing conditions is just simply not worth the time. Doesn't mean you can't do other stuff, though.
Okay, that clarifies it for me. Additional discussion.
If I may again, I know Mr. Frucci talked about having discussions with other commissions, including the DDA. So would that be a part of our plan for moving forward?
For what it's worth, that was what I had in mind.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with bringing this, moving this to the board right now, getting them to start talking about when this belongs in the budget cycle. And then you could put together an ad hoc committee to go through and look at it and say, okay, well, specifically, what aspects don't we like, right? And then, coming up with a plan from there.
Yeah, I don't want to come across as a bull in the china shop. I just want to make sure that we're definitely moving forward on it, at least if it's baby steps.
Additional discussion. I will support the motion, but it is an abstract concept. Okay, to be talking about having open meetings with these communities when you do not have a specific goal or objective in mind. When you have a master plan review, it is a community commitment, okay, where everybody gets formally invited. Everything is a process that's well documented. Everything is by the books. To call somebody in and say, let's have a nice discussion about Macomb Street. Well, I'm sorry, there's no specific objective in mind. Without a specific meeting objective, you will get exactly what you deserve, nothing. You will have a lot of ambiguous talk and very little to show to the community. Okay? Results are what this community cares about, not discussion. And so I think that it is highly abstract to be going in this direction. I'll support the motion because I want to see this thing recertified. But I think you're going to find that it's not as easy to execute outside of the master plan as you think it is. And that's from years of experience. Additional discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Wait, how exactly is the motion going to read? We've changed it 3-4 times.
Eric, Brian?
It's only been changed once.
I think we're still with Eric's motion plus Jay's friendly amendment to have discussions with other stakeholders, talk about, including township board, about budgeting, and I have no idea what I wrote there.
I guess that was my point. We're not very clear.
Okay, well, let's get clear. Okay, what we're specifically saying is, number one, we're certifying the master plan per the statute, the state statute. That's number one. Number two, we're saying that we're running this up to the board to alert them to the fact that, first of all, they need to, they need to hear what we've said about the resolution and vote on it. But also, we're highlighting to them the fact that down the road, in the near term, which 5-year plan is near term for the board, that we're going to need to execute a formal review of the master plan. And that's based on the information that came from Brian, saying that every 15 to 20 years you basically go through this. Okay, so they have to be put on notice of this, that the Planning Commission is thinking about this, and that potentially there are financial implications, and so we alert them to this fact so that they have the opportunity to offer their opinion. They may come back and say, we want you to start tomorrow. I don't know what they'll say. They may say, forget it, we can't afford it for 10 years. I don't know what they'll say, but that's why you ask the question. So we put that up to the board and let them process this and give us their thoughts. Okay? And Steve is right in the context that you don't sneak up on people with things like this. You broach the topic. You open up the door and then let people think about it. And maybe 6 months from now, when they're in the middle of their budget planning in February or whatever, the topic comes up again. Hey, Planning Commission, what do you guys specifically want to do this year? And then the dialogue begins. Okay, so that's the second part of the motion. Informing them of that we've passed the resolution, that we are concerned about the fact that in the near term, we're going to have to work on this Planning Commission again and their implications for the board, financially and procedurally. That's number two. Number three, I heard, was to open up the dialogue with other community elements, be it commissions or committees or organizations that we feel might have some opinion at this point about the master plan, for discussions with the Planning Commission. That was number three, as I understood it. Did I get it correct?
Yes, sir.
Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's your motion?
It's my motion with friendly amendments.
With the friendly amendment. And Jim, that's what you seconded, I think.
Yes, I'm clear now.
Okay. So you still agree to second?
Yes, I second.
Okay. Now, additional discussion. Call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
1 nay. Motion carries. So at this point, Brian, please prepare a resolution for Eric to take to the board, which summarizes those key points, including our proposed direction, and that can be given to Eric for an upcoming board meeting as a topic for them to begin to discuss. Got it?
That much I have.
Eric, will that work for you?
Yeah, that'll work. So just to bring it over the speeds, the next board meeting agenda's already, publication deadline's already passed, so this would be probably the first meeting in October.
Any problem with that? No? Okay. Very good. Okay. I would... Okay, the ambiguous portion of this, which is communications with various groups and organizations, I would entertain a proposal from you, Brian, as to how exactly this would be done and with whom. So I'm going to look to you to basically help coordinate this. I certainly can't do it from the chair's position.
I think it's wrong. We're going outside the proper process. It is wrong, and I'll be at the township board meeting to state the same thing, that it's wrong. We're going outside the normal process because of that third part of that friendly amendment. And I'll ask Eric at the township board meeting that exact question.
Understood. This is, the third part is a little hard for me to swallow, not necessarily the same reasons as you.
That's why I said no.
But you voted no, and that's your position, so, but the majority of the board said otherwise, so that's the way it's going to proceed.
It sets the township board up to, again, be, in that gray zone of supporting a process that is not to the standard that we as a commission has always upheld. So we're going to go before the township, and Eric's going to be up there saying, this is what the Township Planning Commission has asked for, that they've approved, and it's for you to be in that gray zone, board, trustees.
Well, they really don't.
The reason I accepted the friendly amendment is because I think it's fine to begin to accept input on whether we need to redo this or not. We've asked, number one, recertify the current plan. That's a 5-year recertification. Number two, we've asked the township board to say, you need to start thinking about this for future budget. This is good for 5 years, but it's going to take a little while to get this thing redone, put it in the budget cycle, and then go through the 18 to 24-month process. Number three, in the time period, let's have the dialogue. Let's see if there is a need for the master plan. May very well come back and say, you know what, 5 years is good, and in 5 years, you know what, we can go another 5 years.
So who's that dialogue
I don't know
with?
if that's a
How are you
problem.
choosing as a township board member that
Township
dialogue?
board's not doing that. Township board's authorizing the planning commission to do that. It has nothing to do with township board.
We're not
Township
holding public forum.
Township board is approving those exact three things. The third thing is for us to seek input on whether we want to do this or not. It's up to the planning commission. It's not a township board responsibility.
Which exactly comes back to my point.
Which comes right back to us.
That I
so
want
we
to
need to
make
figure out how we want to execute.
I want to hear I want basically a strategy proposed as to how to execute this, with whom and when, and how. Okay, and Jay, if you have opinions on it, would you get pleased with Brian? And at the next meeting, I'd like to have this brought back as a topic. What is the path forward?
Yeah, I think we can talk about it more next time, but I think, as Eric said, in my mind, the purpose is to determine whether we need to revisit the master plan at all. As we sit here today, I don't think we know whether the community believes that our master plan represents the community's goals and objectives and current status. I think that, like I said, in a vague sense, we absolutely do. But I think there may be specific areas where there are differences, and I think the best way to find out is to reach out to those groups who think very carefully about those specific areas. The DPS and the Bike and Pedestrian Commission, they think about those things much more often than we do. We have a roadways master plan discussion or a transportation master plan discussion. I don't know whether that's in keeping with the people who think about it often, or if it's not. I know there are some differences and disagreements between the way our Macomb Street discussion is worded and what the DDA thinks. The DDA's role is to do all of the things that our master plan is intended to do with respect to the DDA, or at least very similar goals and objectives. And getting the two groups who think about those same things on the same page, I think, is a good idea. Ultimately, we control the master plan with the approval of the township board, or you could say the township board, owns the master plan with the input and drafting by us. The DDA does not. We aren't bound by what they think about it, but getting some input from them, I think, would be valuable. So those are the kinds of groups. The Recreation Department, they have a recreation master plan. I don't know whether the recreation master plan is in line with our recreation discussion in our greater master plan or not. All I'm looking for is to, kind of undertake that discussion and solicit the input of people who think about those things on a much more regular basis than we do. And if the feedback from all of those groups is we're all on the same page, or minor tweaks that don't warrant the expense and time of doing what it would take to redo the master plan, if we come back with that, then I think we can walk away from the project feeling much more comfortable that we have made an informed decision. If, on the other hand, we get feedback from a lot of groups that, look, the master plan just does not reflect where we are as a community today, then I think we have to, speak a little more loudly to the township board to say, we need to get the budget now, we need to undertake the study, and we need to understand where we are. So all this is kind of an informal sense of the community through the commissions and committees that think about these things much more often than we do as to whether or not they think we're on the right page. And then from there, we can make an informed decision about whether this is an urgent need or something that we can, as Eric said, put off for another 5 years and potentially another 5 years beyond that.
Understood. Please lay out your vision with Brian. Come back with a proposal as to who and when, as I said before, for discussion at the next meeting. Plus, I would suggest, if you're going to go this route, that you make contact with these other parties. Find out if there is even an interest in doing this. Recognize that our use of the master plan is primarily to define zoning ordinances, which is the legal implementation, the legal standards by which we implement projects. Okay, that is a whole different ballpark than what anybody else around here does. So we cannot sit here without going out like Steve says for the master plan and just all we can do is ask for input. But again, the danger of this is again, remember how much conflicting information we got. Okay, you listen to one party and one party is unhappy. Okay, there might be 3 other parties that we didn't invite because it's not the master plan process that completely disagree with that. Okay, that we as a commission would have to balance off, and so it is not black and white.
Well, I mean, the important point here is that none of this is binding. If we meet with the DDA, for example, that's the one group I'm most familiar with, and the DDA tells us they think that our work is worthless and needs to be completely rewritten, and we as a group think that it still captures the sense of the community, I think we have the right to say, thank you for your input, we'll take it into consideration, and we're not doing it.
We will say that whether we like it or don't like it, because that's we're not making decisions off of this. Whether we agree with it or we disagree with it, if the goal is collecting input, then we thank them for the input and we move on.
Right. In my view, just to preview what I would say next time we talk about this, in my view, there are 2 outcomes of these discussions. One is we don't think it warrants any further action, or we think it warrants moving forward on the master plan process, the full review, the full action. There'd be no incremental changes, in my mind, coming out of these discussions to any part of the master plan. It would be, we don't do anything with the master plan, or we reopen the master plan in the full process. That's the only purpose of this discussion.
No in between.
The only purpose of this discussion is to determine whether or not it makes sense to go the full boat, spend the $70,000 or whatever that's going to cost us, and the time and of a lot of community members. It's a very important and very fulfilling process. I have to admit, it's one of the best things I worked on in my now must be 13, 14 years on the commission. But it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of thinking, it's a lot, so there's a lot to undertake in addition to the cost. And so my sense is, my view is, and I think that's what the commission just approved, is to study whether or not it makes sense to do this in a more expedited manner, or whether it's something that we can tuck away and feel comfortable that we've got a plan that we all feel good about.
Fair enough. I would also say, Brian, that if input is being sought from whoever it is that we invite, okay, it needs to be presented to us. It's not us necessarily pulling information. It's that they have stepped forward. They've evaluated what we have in the master plan. They've critiqued what we have in the master plan, and from that they have opinions. Okay, that means that there's a certain amount of work on their end that has to be done in order to come to us to have a productive session. If we're going to spend 2 hours listening to people, I want to make sure that it's productive for us and for the community, and for them. So make sure that portion of it is stressed. Remember, it was just 6 months ago that we were giving the master plan to the DDA for the first time. Okay, and they weren't even at that point even much aware of ordinances that we had, or why we did what we did. Okay, so there is a wide gulf of knowledge there that has to be bridged if we're going to have constructive sessions.
Well, the scope is, be clear on the scope. The scope is not to rewrite the master plan. The scope is to determine whether we need to do it before 5 years or after 5 years. That's the scope, and that's the question that has to go to these groups, right? Based on your evaluation, DDS or Macomb Street District, do we need to do this now or in 5 years, or 3 years or 8 years? That's the scope of the question, not what do we want to change, because that's not the scope. That's not in the scope. What do we want to change is
Not what
after
we want. We don't necessarily want to change anything. What we want to do is hear what they want to change.
I don't think that's the scope. The scope is, do we need to open the master plan to get the formal process? Because like you said, the formal process is not that each of these various things saying what they want. The scope of the process is saying, right now, does what's in the master plan, does that suit you for the next 5 years? Does it suit you for 10 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever? If the answer is no, then we need to evaluate as a planning commission whether we want to open it, suggest to the board whether we do this in 3 years or 8 years. To me, the scope is not, hey, what do you want changed? Because what do you want changed is a new master plan. That is a completely different question than does the master plan suit you for 5 years?
Well, the logical question, if someone says, I want to change the master plan, is why?
That's not the scope. That's not the question we're asking you.
But why? We have to understand if they want the master plan reopened, why do they want to reopen? What issues in that master plan are unacceptable to them? That's a logical question.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. I think the scope of the discussion is, what do you think of the master plan that covers your specific area, the aspects of it that cover your specific area? Does it cover what you want? If not, why not? But ultimately, the decision is yes or no. We reopen, and if we reopen, it's not the DDA who gets to say, it's the community who gets to say.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
So the DDA may tell us, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. Our studies show that this doesn't work. Our studies show that we need to go this direction, that sort of thing. That's all very interesting, but ultimately, it's a community decision, and before that, it's a decision by the board and by us. Are those the sorts of changes that would warrant reopening this to do a full study? So that's why I say I agree with both of you. I think the scope, the decision-making is black and white. It's yes or no. The discussion is probably more why.
Brian, are you clear on what it is you need to do?
We'll get there, yes.
Okay. Have a discussion, please, with Jay. And at the next meeting, this will be, we'll talk about this again and lay out the vision and the direction for the commission as a whole, for their input, comments, corrections, whatever.
Absolutely.
Agreed? Okay. It is now 10 o'clock. It is our normal end time for the meeting. So I would propose, please, that we drop the remaining items on the agenda, the Bayview presentation as well as the chair's report, and discuss the possible next meeting. Is there anything in the hopper in the way of applications?
Yes, we have one, I would call it 90% complete lot split application.
Okay.
We have also had some contact with one of the Macomb Street projects that did pre-app with you last spring, not the gas station one, the one with, if you remember, kind of the firehouse style design.
Office.
They I believe they did find an architect. I believe they are working towards site plan submittal. And then we actually have a new one on Macomb Street that is also working towards site plan submittal. Not sure exactly what their timing is going to be, though. So
Okay.
we do have a few things that are out there.
Do you have a feel for when we might want to meet again, or would you rather wait, let these things mature, and then make a proposal?
I would, let me see, we're in third Monday, September. Yeah, I mean, even if we got everything tidied up, I mean, the soonest I think we would want to do is, the third Monday in October if everything was ready, and that's going to be pretty quick. So,
why don't we back it up, give ourselves a little room, and make it the first?
Tentatively, if we went the first Monday in November, we would certainly have enough time to process whatever we may have.
Okay, let's target for that. What date is that? And let's see if everybody's available.
That's the 2nd.
November 2nd?
Correct.
What do you think, guys? Eric?
I mean, I guess, Mr. Chair, I could certainly, I mean, if we get things tidied up with the gentleman who's here tonight is the lot split applicant. I mean, if we get that tidied up on the quick, we can try to meet sooner, but I'm just a little concerned about some of the timing.
I would like to maximize the efficiency if we can. 2 more weeks is not a big deal for a lot split, so let's take the time and see if we can process site plans as well.
Sure. We'll certainly be in touch. Joe, we'll talk. And, yeah, I'll have either Lori or I will reach out to the other 2 projects, let them know, and we'll give them submittal deadlines should they want to try to make that agenda.
Very good. November 2nd. Okay, on that basis, we're going to, again, postpone the other items on the agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.